had team members literally in that 24, 48-hour window say, oh my gosh, that made my day so much easier. Thank you. And then they would add to the systems. And then before you know it, the next week, they come to me saying, hey, so I loved what we did with this area of the business. I had an idea for this other area. And it was an amazing type of thing.
Yeah, I can see how that would make a world of difference, even though, again, sometimes the things that make the biggest difference are the simplest things. It's just that we don't carve out the time or the priority to do that, right? Because we're already so overwhelmed trying to keep afloat with everything else. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the show. Today, I have Amanda Moffett here with us, and I'm so excited because Amanda is also a listener of the show, and these are my favorite type of case studies because we love featuring listeners and people who really understand this show format, and Amanda has a really juicy case study for us today. It's all about how she implemented this GOLD framework in her own business to reduce her working hours from around 45 hours a week down to 15 hours a week, which is so impressive. You basically shaved off like a full week's worth of tasks off your plate. So anyways, before we get into that, Amanda, I would love to hear your Cubicle to CEO story. What was that catalyst that launched you into entrepreneurship?
Yes. So I feel like I have a pretty unusual start into the business world. I was offered to buy a business when I was 17 years old. I always had that entrepreneurial bug, but it's not like I had any big ideas or things that I knew I was going to do when I graduated high school or something. But my old boss, who used to own this dance studio locally, offered for me to buy it when she moved. And I was 17 at the time, and I bought it about a month or so after I turned 18 years old. And within my first year, I doubled my revenue and just scaled, hired, fired. I was just launched like full time into the business world from absolutely nothing. I mean, like think of the average 17, 18-year-old And so I bought this business that was already completely established. It had multiple employees, about 100 clients at the time, and was just very much so a functioning business that I just had to jump into and learn from the ground up. And all of a sudden, I was the boss. All of a sudden, I was the CEO. And so it was very fun, very exciting, extremely difficult, and taught me so much about life and business very quickly. So it was a blessing.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, that's huge. I've never known anyone who was basically straight out of high school and got offered such a big opportunity to take over a business. And huge kudos to you for having the bravery to do that as well. I don't know if at, the age of 17 or 18, I would have had the courage to take on such a big responsibility. So that's incredible. And I love that you have that brick and mortar experience to now kind of, help you look at business, I'm sure, through a more broad lens because you have run different types of businesses. Because I understand now, obviously, you're focused on online coaching services and programs. But let's talk about for your current business, how you refocused your chaotic business schedule from, like we said before, 45 hours a week into 15 hours a week. And before we even get into that GOLD framework that we talked about, I'd love for you to set the stage for our listeners and kind of just talk about how you were feeling in that time period before you implemented this. Like, what was your day-to-day like? How did you wake up? What was your nervous system feeling?
Oh man, my nervous system was not feeling good things. I was absolutely overwhelmed, so stressed, felt like such a failure all of the time. I felt like I was lacking so much. I was so confused. My skin was not thick at all yet, and my feelings would get hurt so easily throughout the business world. I felt like I was this tiny little fish in a storm in an ocean, just being thrashed around and not having a good time. And so it was not good. I did not feel positive things most of the time. And it was actually pretty depressing and gave me a lot of anxiety. It was hard to fall asleep. It was stressful to wake up. It was very difficult. And so that is definitely the catalyst for why I decided things need to change. I need to make a pivot. This is not what I want to live my entire life like. I know that other people experience business differently than I am right now. I need some of that.
I can absolutely relate to that, Amanda. And I feel like every single person listening to this podcast has probably also felt those feelings at one point or another in their business. So you kind of decided, all right, I need to change something about this. I'm going to do essentially like an assessment of my business for myself. And you came up with this framework, GOLD, GOLD, and we'll kind of go through each one individually. Did you come up with this kind of all on your own, by the way, or was this based off of something you had read or heard or learned somewhere else?
So I came up with the GOLD acronym and I created the framework around it to make it tangible for other people to use. But the original, actual practical what you're doing inside of the framework, it was actually inspired by something that my now husband, but my boyfriend at the time, encouraged me to do. So naturally, he was one of those people who I went to on a bad day or explaining my stressors and all of those things in business. And he said, hey, I have an idea. Let's just go out to lunch. Let's sit down with pen and paper, and I'm just gonna help you organize your thoughts, and let's just see if we can figure some of this stuff out, which, is amazing to look back on. I'm so grateful for him, and I just pray that everyone listening has someone like that in their lives. And so he helped me kind of do this, basically the GOLD framework, and I've added a little bit to it and made it tangibly relatable to people and something that they can do in their own lives and business.
What a wonderful husband and partner at the time. Yes, very, very lucky that you had that support system in your corner. So with G then, go internally. And the big takeaway I got as I was kind of reviewing these notes before we hopped on our call is it really forces you to not just fix what you're already doing. It's not fixing your current business. It's actually making you reimagine what your entire business even looks like, right? So tell us about that process for you. How did you start to reimagine and what kind of things were you discovering as you went internally?
Yes, I love that word you used, reimagine, because that's exactly what it is. It's innovating and reimagining what could be. So what that looked like for me was sitting down at a nice meal in a calm environment, and I just literally had a pen and my journal, and I just wrote out my biggest dreams, the things that were truly, truly important to me. And the key element to this is to not think about your current reality. If you do, you will be holding yourself back. And so what I did was I just wrote out my biggest dreams, no matter how big or scary they seemed. You just write out what is your ideal vision for your life, your ideal vision for your team, for your business, for your numbers, for your reach, anything you can think of that you would actually want in your life, in your business. And so that go internally for me looked like being in a safe, comfortable, happy, calm environment, a nice restaurant. And I was a nice restaurant by the water. I'll never forget where I was sitting. And it was my pen and paper and my dreams and thoughts. And it was honestly so fun. It's really healthy, and it kind of felt healing to do this, of thinking, okay, I get to choose what I do in my life and I get to choose my next steps. I don't have to stay here. Let's see what I can come up with. What do I actually want?
I love that. And I feel like you and I are so similar in being able to do our best thinking by the water with pen and paper. So I can absolutely relate to that too. What was one big, scary, audacious vision that you had written down at that time that felt very unlikely or realistic, but has actually come true since then? Can you think of one?
Oh yeah. Immediately, right off the bat, I wanted to be less involved with direct client communication, direct client touch points. I wanted to more so manage a team who was really excellent at executing the services we actually provide. And so at the time, I was very much so a touch point and very much so in the email inbox and doing all of the actual day-to-day things. At that time, I had not cultivated a team that, took initiative by themselves and truly were leaders in their own right yet. And so a big dream of mine was to truly be in that seat of CEO, managing a team who did the work rather than be super direct one-on-one with clients regularly, weekly.
Awesome. And I'm sure, that's essential to the ability to scale as well. So I can see how that vision really came to fruition in your own business. So if G is all about the what, not the how, O is really about, okay, now let's actually bring this into reality. You're organizing into categories, all of the different areas of your business, right? So tell us, what were the categories in your business at the time? And was this something that you, I guess, were even cognizant of before you did this exercise? Was this something you thought about, or was this really eye-opening for you, and why?
This was extremely eye-opening for me because I had never thought about it like this. So something like I said, my now husband, but my boyfriend at the time, he said, let's just write out everything that's on your mind. Every little task that you have to do today, every future dream, every random communication that you don't want to forget for next month, every single thing that is clouding your mind and stressing you out right now, write it down. So it's like a big, huge, brain exercise, a brain dump of just put it down on paper until you can't think of anything else. And then you start to see patterns. You start to see, oh wow, most of this stuff has to do with maybe the tech end of my business, or maybe most of it is actually personal life things. Maybe you have less going on in your business than you thought, and it's actually just your life stuff that's stressing you out. But you start to see what's actually in your brain down on paper, which is extremely powerful. So after you get all of it written down and you truly can't think of anything else to add to this list, then you do the organizing into categories and you start to see, oh wow, all of these have to do with team. So you can create a category of team. All of these have to do with my kids. All of these have to do with that one really difficult client. All of these have to do with my podcast. All of these have to do with this project, and then you organize into categories. So what you're left with is everything that was clouding your mind and going on, and all the projects and the tasks and the team members and the clients and your personal life things too. I think that's a really important aspect because we're not just business owners, we're, spouses and parents and friends and all of these things. And so what you're left with is seeing your whole brain and life in categories organized on paper in front of you. And that alone honestly takes away so much stress. Just seeing it in that way is really powerful in and of itself. And so that's what I did.
And for you, when you were organizing into these categories, what categories for your business did you notice emerged as kind of like the mammoths of your business, if you will, like the ones that kind of encompassed most of your thoughts and stresses and just brain space, if you will?
Mostly it was client communication, all the back and forth, handling all of the details for all of the client communication, and future projects, upcoming events, timelines for that type of thing, projects that are coming down the pipeline. And I had also a category for personal because it happened to be during the time when I was about to get engaged and we were serious about moving forward and getting married. And so there were a lot of personal things going on too.
Yeah, I can remember that season of life because I'm recently married only, we just celebrated a year this past August. So anyways, I do remember how much just like mental space that took up in my time. And it felt really distracting, from the business, or maybe the business was distracting from, the preparing for marriage. So that's really helpful, I think, to see on paper, like you said, all of the different things that are actually occupying your time and your energy. Now we move on to L, the label piece. So once you had all of these areas and these tasks in your business organized into categories, you then went through and labeled what you currently do from a scale of 0 to 3, 0 being I want to get rid of this 100%, like you're very certain about that, and 3 being I definitely want to keep this. So I was actually curious, the 0 to 3 rating scale, why 0 to 3 instead of 0 to 10? Is there like a specific reason behind that, or is it just kind of like arbitrary?
I think for me, 0 to 10 sounds overwhelming, and it feels like I would procrastinate and overthink. Is it a 6? Is it a 7? I feel like it's too many numbers for my brain. I need simple, I need tangible, I need practically helpful. And I know that busy CEOs need that too. And so I think the 0 to 3 it's kind of like decision fatigue. It allows you to just have a clearer path, and you don't have to like analyze too deeply. In your gut, your instincts, like when you look at this list, when you write everything out, when you categorize everything, you will instinctually know, oh wow, those 3 things, those are zeros. I know they're zeros right away when I look at this page. And for some reason, it just feels like 0 to 3 felt a lot more tangibly helpful, because when you're doing this type of exercise, a lot of the times you're overwhelmed already. That's why you're even doing this. That's why you're even thinking about this. And so the last thing you need is like a complicated, larger scale, having to think of more numbers. That just didn't sit right with me.
I actually think it's so smart. I was thinking that's probably why you chose the smaller scale, but I always like to ask because I'm super curious about how people's brains work and if it's the same as, what the train of thought that I was going down. So glad to know that, yes, it was just about eliminating that decision fatigue. And did you also apply this process of rating your tasks just for your own tasks, or did you have all your team members do this for their own tasks as well?
I only did this myself. So I intentionally didn't include my team in this because I wanted it to very much be like truly from the top, my leadership, my brain, because what this was it was more than creating a more efficient to-do list. For me, this was, like we talked about earlier, reimagining how I wanted my business to look. Like it was truly like very big consequential decisions. Honestly, it might have been decisions that ended up changing the team structure or, how we even package our services, like really big things. And I wasn't ready to bring the team I had at that time into that type of leadership, visionary decision making.
Completely understandable. And speaking of asking yourself those kind of consequential questions, in our research leading up to this interview, you had shared some of the questions that you had asked yourself as you were scoring these different tasks and areas in your business that helped you gain clarity on whether it was a 0, 1, 2, or 3. So I don't know if you have those questions in front of you, Amanda, or just like stored in your head, but I'd love to go through those questions because as I was reading them, I thought, wow, these are so powerful. Do you want to share some of those questions?
Yes. I don't know if I remember like verbatim what you're thinking of, but I definitely have some great questions. So a really great question that I had floating around in my head the entire time is, if I had a magic wand and I knew the exact way to make this happen overnight, what would I change right now? And because sometimes when we just ask ourselves, well, what is most important? We start to get all logistical in our minds and we kind of overcomplicate it and we think of only the here and now, not what could be, what you could be working towards. And then you limit yourself and all of a sudden you're not actually at your goals because you were kind of thinking and playing small the whole time. So kind of that idea of a magic wand of truly, if I could change this overnight and it would always be like this from now on, what would I actually get rid of? What would I implement or add? What would I shift around? So that was really powerful for me because it kind of cut through the noise that my own brain would make, and you make up excuses for yourself sometimes and you overcomplicate things and all of this stuff. And so that question really helped bring a lot of clarity to what I was actually there for. Another good question might be, what do you want your week to look like? What do you want your literal mornings on Wednesday to look like? Do you want to sleep in? Do you want Wednesdays to be a heavy meeting day? Do you want to start work at 1 p.m. every day? Do you want to start work at 11 a.m. and end at 1? Like, you need to ask yourself, what do I literally want my actual life to look like? If we don't ask ourselves questions like that, all of a sudden the weeks and the years roll by and you aren't living in what your dreams were and you could have been.
Yeah, that's so true. And I like that you start with, again, what does your ideal schedule, your ideal life look like, instead of how do I build an efficient schedule for my tasks and then just plug that into my life. It's like you're not letting the confines of what you're doing dictate what your schedule looks like. Instead, you're saying, okay, I only have between the hours of, 9 to 1, if that's like your working hours. Now, how do I do the opposite and make sure that what I'm doing actually fits into my dream lifestyle? So I think that's a great perspective shift. And some of the other questions that really stood out to me that you had submitted ahead of time that you had, asked yourself as you were going through. I'm just going to quickly list them for our listeners because they're too good for them to miss out on. So obviously, like kind of more high level questions like what currently gives me joy in the business and what gives me dread? Like what do I get drained from when I do it and it leaves me feeling empty? I also thought this question was really interesting. Which tasks do I procrastinate on due to not enjoying them? That really jumped out at me because I was like, oh yeah, there's totally things in my business. Like I can immediately think of some things where I'm like, I always push that off till the very last minute. So that one I thought was really enlightening. Another question that you asked yourself was, if I could only keep one area of my business, which would it be? And then conversely, if I had to delete one area of my business today, which would I choose? And I was like, wow, those are, again, very consequential questions. And then the last one that I thought was very helpful is you had already asked yourself, what gives you a lot of joy in your business, but you also asked yourself, what aspect of work am I excited to talk about? Which I don't know if I've ever thought about it that way because, we always think about like, what do we internally feel excitement around, but not really like, how do we actually express that excitement into the world? And so like kind of being cognizant of what you like to talk about in your business to other people when they ask you like, what do you do? Or like, tell me about your business. I just thought that was really, really interesting. Is there any gap that I missed there that you just want to add a little bit of additional insight to?
Yeah, no, those are very powerful questions. I'm glad you read them out. I think those are questions that every single business owner should write down on a piece of paper, hang it up on your wall next to where you work, and just look at them. Like truly just look at them every once in a while, sit down and ponder them, make yourself a yummy drink that you enjoy, and just sit there and think about those questions because those are the consequential questions that literally shape your business and your life. Like those are the types of questions that make you switch your entire business model because all of a sudden you've realized, oh my goodness, I don't want to have one-on-one clients anymore. Why do I have so many one-on-one clients? I want to have a membership model. But you never would have thought of that maybe or been courageous enough to do the actual jump. But those are the questions that really reveal a lot. They're very showing, they're very telling. And I love how you mentioned, what do you enjoy talking about with others when people ask, oh, wow, like that's so cool. What do you enjoy about what you do? Like, what's your favorite part? Like, what would come to mind first? And what would you never want to bring up at a party, small talking? The procrastination comment, the question is very powerful, extremely revealing. I would say the thing or the things you're thinking of, figure out a way to either delete them and replace them or delete them entirely or delegate them really well. Yeah, those are really awesome questions. I love them. They were life-changing for me.
Well, I was just going to say all the credit goes to you because those were your questions. I just regurgitated them for our listeners. But yes, thank you so much for just kind of, again, I think sometimes those questions are helpful in us finding the right score, right? For how we really feel about something. And after you had scored all of these tasks for yourself from 0 to 3, you actually then organized your answers into those column lists by 0, 1, 2, and 3. So if you can remember back, what did you discover that you had to eliminate based on how you scored your answers? And were you surprised by those answers?
Yes, I was surprised. And I think that's the best type of brain exercise and strategy session is when you do find something out that you really didn't know you were going to when you went into it. So a few things I found out very quickly were I want to delegate a lot of the in-depth, detail-oriented client communications. I want to delegate the phone things, the messages, the email inboxes. I want to figure out more so a very strategic tech side of things that I'm not a part of at all. And I decided I'm going to have an email address that is strictly me as the CEO. No clients have it. Only my team has it. I actually created a way that clients genuinely couldn't even get in touch with me directly. Every single time they needed me, they would go to my right hand first. She would field and then I would get the most important, if it's truly a question for me, that's fine. I just didn't want to get every single thing right away. So a big thing that I remember was client communication. That's a very tangible thing that I changed and restructured and all of the things for that.
I feel like it's interesting too, because, at the very beginning when you were, just starting with the G, the go internally and thinking of like your vision, you already had imagined for yourself, I don't really want to be as tied to the client communications. And then clearly by the time you got to L and labeling and like scoring, these different tasks, your answers actually confirmed what you had felt all along. And aside from your own personal, tasks, like you kind of stepping away from a lot of that client communication and that technology side of your business because of you delegating these things, was there any part of your business that you actually fully eliminated?
Yes, there was. So I've since sold this first company, the dance studio, but a part of my decision was I was going to delete what in the dance world we call a competition team. And so to make it tangible for if you don't know anything about the dance world, the competition teams, they travel around the state, sometimes around the country, and compete at these regional and national dance competitions. A studio does not have to have a team like this. It can also just be regular classes and recreational. And the competition team was something that gave me a lot of anxiety, a lot of stress. I did not see the pros and cons level out the way I would have liked. And so I actually changed that entire structure and actually renamed it to be Performance Company, and we did more local shows, and the traveling to regional competitions became optional, not mandatory, which if you've ever been in the studio world, that actually is a huge difference in the logistics of planning your entire year, planning your shows, planning performances, planning traveling events. Like, it's actually a lot of behind the scenes that changed based on changing that structure of how it all worked. So that was a huge, huge difference.
That's really helpful. And, I don't come from the studio dance world, but I did grow up dancing in different studios that were more kind of what you shifted to, where it was like about the, let's say, annual recital or like performing at local events, which I loved. And then, of course, in high school and college, I did dance team and there were competitions related to that. But I can totally understand what you mean by if you have any aspect of competition part of your studio, like it really does become your entire focus and your weekends are completely occupied by that. So that was really helpful. If you've applied this framework since then in your current business, have you eliminated anything from your current coaching and education business that you maybe were surprised by? Again, something that you thought you wanted to do, but then realized, wait a second, this is actually not the right fit.
Yes, I do not take on one-on-one clients. I do not advertise that. I'm only membership model now. I have one one-on-one client, and it's hard to count her. She's my mom's best friend. And every now and then I help her with some business things. She's like an aunt to me, but I do not have any true one-on-one coaching clients currently. And so that is a wonderful, very intentional decision.
Yes, I can see that. And for some people, it's so funny. And this is, I think, why doing this exercise is so important, because for some people, they may realize, like I had a good business coach friend that actually realized the membership model. So the opposite was not for her, and she shut down her membership to focus on one-on-one clients. So I love that clarity and what is right, quote unquote, is so different for each person. So thank you for sharing, what you've discovered. And that kind of leads us into that last piece of the GOLD framework, which is D, draft your new plan and next steps. And so you kind of already reference that you use the scoring system to figure out what you wanted to delete entirely, what you wanted to delegate. And then the other two portions of it where you were able to identify what you wanted to simply pause for a season and what you wanted to add into your business. So that's very interesting to me. What is one new thing you actually added into your business as a result of going through this process? And then what was something that you paused for a season?
Yeah, so something I added was a team member, because I realized, you very quickly see the gap between what you want and what you're currently doing. And I realized that there was this whole chunk of tasks that were very related that I didn't love doing, but they really did have to get done. I wasn't going to delete them. It was more so like the public image, outward events, more so publicity type things. And so I hired a whole team member, and I called them because I like to keep things fun in my business for my team members, and we called her the Magical Moments Coordinator.
Oh, I love that.
And so her job was to create magical moments and just have that beautiful like public image, events, decor, like the extra sprinkle on top. You know, when you work with a company and maybe they're great, but it's pretty cut and dry and normal type services. And then sometimes you work with a company and they send you a special customized card and they call you on your birthday and they send you a treat after you finish your package with them in the mail or something, you know, those types of touch points. I actually hired someone to do all of that sort of stuff, the magical moments. So that was a big thing that we added, which took a ton of hours of work off of my plate weekly. I mean, so regularly. So that was a huge chunk already. And then we paused certain events throughout the year, which took a lot of hours off. And in fact, what was amazing was at the time, I didn't fully know this. Now I live this way, but I truly believe that less is more, focusing on fewer events, fewer launches, fewer services, different offers, but going so all in on those few things or two things or one thing that you do is the magic sauce of business and life and joy and peace of mind as a business owner. And so we paused a lot of what felt like busy work throughout the year to focus on a few things and do them really well.
There's so much truth to that, by the way. Like focus, I think, is like the most underrated strategy, business strategy, really. And you can go so far if you really pour all of your time and resources into scaling one thing instead of multiple things. So absolutely agree there. So during this entire process where you were walking yourself through this GOLD framework, you said it took you originally about 2 weeks to fully flesh out like all of your thoughts and ideas and everything for this process. And I know at the time when you started this, you were feeling extremely overwhelmed. Like you said, you were waking up with anxiety, you had all these things on your plate. So how did you actually carve out the time, these 2 weeks, amongst the overwhelm you were feeling? Did you take a trip? Did you tell your team, hey, I have to go away for 2 weeks and like give me some time to figure some things out? Or yeah, how did you make this happen?
I very, very practically did this later at night. So I had that initial like lunch dream date, this vision date, if you will, of getting it all down on paper and just starting the process and getting my gears turning. And then I kept it all in a Google Doc so that I could access it from my phone, from anywhere. And I would go through this Google Doc and write out plans and highlight things and create basically my action plan of what am I going to do with this information now. And what was nice is because it was on a Google Doc, I was able to access it at any time, no matter where I was. And so if I was at the gas station or the grocery store and something came to me that I just needed to write down or I had an idea, I quickly just jotted it down. And so practically what it looked like was just totally thinking about it regularly, mulling it over, and any little moment that I had an idea for something to do in the future or to delete or to delegate, I would just write it down. And then when the world was quiet and kind of my day was done, I would go into this like little mental headspace of, okay, now I'm going to work on like my dream, my future. Like I did my daily stuff. I kept the gears turning. I kept the operations going today. I didn't leave the country for 2 weeks and go on some retreat or whatever. And for most business owners, this will probably look like, you know, maybe you have like a weekend at a local hotel and you just go sit in a room by yourself, and that's amazing. Totally do that if you're able to. But I just took time in the evenings for myself to just dream and work and plan.
Thank you, by the way, for painting that very realistic picture of what that looked like. Because like you said, I think for a lot of business owners, especially those who feel stuck in the chaos of their business, it's very difficult to just totally, remove themselves. And so I love that you were able to build that into your already existing routine and kind of find those pockets of time and then really get quiet with yourself at night. So that was really really, really helpful. Now, the results, I mean, this part I think is super, super cool because it took you 2 weeks to kind of figure out what it is that you wanted to change or do different to reimagine your business. But then it actually took 3 months for you to fully implement the systems and the changes that resulted from the clarity that you got from this exercise. So 3 months to implement. We'll get into that in just a moment. But another really cool aspect of this is that your team actually saw improvements within the first 24 hours. So tell us what happened in these first 24 hours.
Yes. So what I realized was when I'm more organized and when I have better systems in place, my team benefits from that as well, because nobody wants to work in a confused, disorganized environment. People want to be led and people want to be a part of something that has vision and boundaries and structure in place. It's fun because when you have organization, you actually get to fly freer because there's not all this muddy confusion. So what I did first was I implemented a few super basic good systems. For example, if there were a few questions that we would get like all the time via email, so something so practical, which is so small, but very big tangibly if you're the one doing the work day in, day out, I created a Google Doc of frequently asked questions and the perfect response that I typed out once, did all the things, took screenshots of examples of back and forths. I created like basically a standard operating procedure layout template. And I told my manager at my right hand, hey, this is the Google Doc. Simply copy and paste and fill in the blanks for anything similar to this. And anytime you get a question that you've seen before, add it to this Google Doc. And right away, that practically saved my team and I time that day, that week. And it became one of those things where it's not just the systems that save you time. It's also the systems that make it more enjoyable for you to actually show up and makes your team enjoy their work more because your team doesn't want to be stressed either. They don't want to be confused either. The happier they are working in their roles, the better they show up, the more ideas they come to you with. It's like this beautiful win-win situation because when they enjoy their job and when they feel like they have clarity and it's all running well, all of a sudden you have team members that want to step up more and take initiative. They come to you with great ideas and they're excited about their work. So it's a really good thing. So super practically, I made a few Google Docs with different systems because I was now thinking in the way of, wait a second, how do I make this easier for myself and everyone around me? Let's just simply cut down on the amount of thinking and decisions we have to make all of the time. And I had team members literally in that 24, 48 hour window say, oh my gosh, that made my day so much easier. Thank you. That was so great. And then they would add to the systems. And then before you know it, the next week, they come to me saying, hey, so I loved what we did with this area of the business. I had an idea for this other area. And it was an amazing type of thing.
Yeah, I can see how that would make a world of difference, even though, again, sometimes the things that make the biggest difference are the simplest things. It's just that we don't carve out the time or the priority to do that, right? Because we're already so overwhelmed trying to keep afloat with everything else. And so thank you for giving us that really tangible example of one key change you made that really just instantly uplifted, like you said, everybody on your team and empowered them to be more self-sufficient, if you will. So then the rest of these changes you tackled over a 3-month window, right? This implementation. Can you walk us through just really high level what the timeline of those 3 months look like? What were you working on in the first month, second month, third month? Did you expect it to take 3 months? Were you expecting it to take longer, shorter? Any hindsight that you can share, we would love.
Yeah, definitely. So I did not know how long all of this was going to take because I was just the entrepreneur, boots on the ground, figuring it out and rolling out all of these changes. So first, I got really clear myself. So it was very important to me that I did not go to my team with random ideas, but no structure. I really wanted to know and be confident in the changes I was making because I didn't want them to feel insecure about their job or stressed and confused just because I didn't have the answers that day. So in the first probably 2 to 4 weeks, I really figured out, what does this actually look like? Do I need to create any new documents? Do I need to write out announcement emails? Do I need to film announcement videos? Like what are the changes I'm making? How do I roll this out? Who do I roll it out first to? What does that look like for our social media? Like, does the website need to be updated in areas? Like all of those types of things. And then I rolled it out to my team first. Super important. I'm a huge believer of your team should basically never find something out like from a client or from your website or from your social media. There are, I think, random nuanced exceptions maybe, but truly like most of the time, you want to go into changes and updates with just an awesome combined force, and everyone's on the same page, everyone has clarity, everyone's excited and knows what's going on. And so I rolled everything out to my team first, and I basically showed them everything, explained where I was coming from, painted a picture and a vision of excitement and joy and clarity, and showed them how they fit into that as well so that they could join me in being excited. And it was an amazing thing. They were able to basically jump on to the bandwagon, and then they were excited about coming to me with ideas. And what's amazing is when you cast this type of vision and explain all of that to your team, as well as how they fit into the picture and why this is amazing for them too, they reciprocate that, and then they'll come to you with different ideas that you never had even thought about, and you think, oh my goodness, that's actually an incredible idea. You're so right. That does fit in with our vision now. So it becomes like this really fun snowball effect. And then month 3 is when we as the team were able to roll out and announce changes and pivot things, because in month 2, it was like talk with the team and have them work on it with me, do all of the nitty gritty things, play devil's advocate and clean it up and iron it out. So then in month 3, it was more so public visibility things.
Thank you. That's extremely helpful. And knowing all of this now and having gone through it with, your previous business, then your current business, if you were to ever implement this again, well, actually that's kind of a 2-part question, I guess. Do you do this framework in your own business every so often, just kind of as a quick check, even if you're maybe not feeling the pull of overwhelm anymore? And then B, having gone through this, before, is there anything you would do different if you were to do it again?
Yes, I definitely do this currently. It's become more so a way of thinking now. So it's not like I hit this wall over and over and have to really sit down with myself and redo everything, because now I think in this way. Now I think in systems. And what's cool is when you do the nitty gritty deep work of going through this framework once, super detail oriented, then it becomes so familiar and second nature. Now, when you look at future opportunities and future business decisions and strategy meetings, all these things, you go into it already preemptively thinking, is this something I would delete in 6 months? Is this something that is a full yes? Is this something that I want to delegate right away? Do I have to be the one to do this? And so you already think that way ahead of time. And I cannot even tell you the amount of stress and the amount of work hours and the amount of overwhelm that I've saved myself over the years from literally just thinking of this framework and doing it preemptively with new things that come down the pipeline. And so, yeah, I do it regularly in my head mostly. I think it's smart maybe once or twice a year to truly write it out and see where you're at, because there's power in that. But now it truly is a way of life for me in my personal life too. It's really fun. And then looking back in hindsight, I think that something I might have done differently is involve my team more in the planning, a little bit earlier on maybe, because they really did have a lot of good ideas and we did work together on all of this. But I think that I might have put a bit too much pressure on myself to be the only one coming up with everything. And this does depend on your team. It really does. Maybe you're in a business where the structure that has to change is that you have to change everyone who's on your team. I had members on my team that genuinely like really did care and they were personally invested and they would have had great insights earlier on. So I might have approached them more as like a, hey, let's brainstorm together and do this together type thing.
Thank you for sharing the wisdom of your hindsight with us. I know that's invaluable because you truly don't know until you've done it before. And I think it's really encouraging to hear too that this gold framework has really become your way of thinking. And it's a constant. It's not like you said, it's not a thing you do once a year and then you kind of put it on a shelf. It's like every single day you're thinking through some of these questions and looking forward to the future in what you choose to even spend your time on today. So thank you, Amanda, for coming on and sharing this. Where can our listeners continue to connect with you, learn more about the work that you're doing?
So I'm super active over on Instagram at pursuit.company. And so I hang out there all the time. That's where you'll see all of my up-to-date things. So I would love if you just DM me like a little voice memo, like who you are, what you're doing. I love connecting with other entrepreneurs who are passionate about life and their work. So I totally love connecting over there. And I also have a podcast, the Pursuit Podcast. So every week on Monday, I share some strategies and systems and business organization things. So I love connecting those two places.
Amazing. Well, those links will be below in the show notes for everyone listening. And hey, Mondays are clearly an amazing day for podcast drops. So if you're already listening to Cubicle to CEO, you should definitely add the Pursuit podcast to your rotation so you get double the goodness on Mondays. Thank you, Amanda, again for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Ellen. It was such a joy.